I think curious people
just be curious about AI.
Being curious. I'm curious.
Being curious.
I'm curious.
I'm just curious.
I'm just curious.
I'm curious though.
I think curiosity.
It's the curiosity piece.
This idea of curiosity.
Instill curiosity.
Welcome to the Deacs.AI podcast, where Wake Forest innovators unpack the real-world magic of artificial intelligence through candid conversations. I'm Michael Ferrari.
I'm Ryan Scholl.
Please join us as we explore how artificial intelligence is transforming work across campus, one fascinating story at a time. Elizabeth Ricks is back on Deacs.AI, and she's brought along with her a good friend, Javier Guillen of Microsoft. Both are educators and industry veterans, and they discuss how artificial intelligence has actually changed the fields of data analytics, healthcare, and the classroom, and we also discuss when it's the right move to hand over control to the AI. Prognosticating into the near future, they warn of why an opinion you formed about AI 2 years ago is already out of date. And finally, they leave us with the secret to unlocking transformational power. Curiosity is the skill that makes any of this work.
This is the Deacs.AI podcast, and we have another special episode where we are welcoming back a special friend of the pod, one of our most popular guests. She is an associate professor of practice in the School of Business with a focus on data storytelling. Welcome, Elizabeth Ricks.
Hi, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And because Michael and I are not super fun to talk to, she's actually brought along a friend with her. She's brought Javier Guillen, the director of cloud and AI platform for U.S. Health and Life Sciences at Microsoft, who also happens to be an adjunct professor of analytics. Now, unfortunately, not at Wake Forest, so we'll forgive him for that. But welcome, Javier.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
One thing that I know we're going to get into in the discussion that I'm excited is, as we just said, that both of our guests today have real world experience, like I like to call real world, and they're also currently educators. So we have those perspectives of both worlds. And this is going to be fun, that when we did our prep call, they are not completely aligned on everything. So we're going to get some fun discussion here. So Michael and I may sit back and have our popcorn and, let you two talk for a while, but we'll see. Elizabeth, though, I did want to bring it back. Last time you were on, do you remember how long ago it was? The last time you talked to us?
I do not. I don't remember.
It was about a year ago. It was interesting how many of the topics that we talked about are still relevant, and then some, possibly changed, but still talked about understanding the audience and the context in whatever way you're interacting with artificial intelligence. Students need to validate the AI output, still obviously super relevant. One thing I am curious about was you said that majority of your students were cautious and skeptical about AI use. Has that changed much in the last year, do you think?
Yes. It's funny kind of going back in time and remembering where you were at specific points in time. I couldn't have told you that. So that's interesting that we have that on record because everything moves so quickly. And I think about, fast forward a year now, and I rarely ever hear that as much about skepticism. I think skepticism, and I would say maybe more from a healthy perspective around just like risks and privacy and, the ethics around AI, but not skepticism around using it or, I don't know how to get started, or I don't know what AI is, or I think that piece is probably gone.
So that's interesting. So for some of our listeners who are just hearing you speak now, it would be great for them to go back and listen to the other episode and compare it to all the wisdom you're going to impart on us today.
Sure.
So Javier, if you wouldn't mind maybe introducing yourself a little bit and telling us slightly about your background at Microsoft and a little bit about what you teach.
Yeah. So again, thanks for having me here at the podcast. I work for Microsoft as part of their commercial cloud team. I specialize in cloud and AI technologies. And specifically, I work with healthcare organizations, payer provider, helping them drive, AI implementations and cloud modernization as part of their operations. And I teach for a university in New York. I teach Introduction to Cloud as well as Python programming.
Great.
And I'll just jump in. Javier and I have known each other for many years now. He and I both live in Charlotte, and we're both at one point co-organizers of the Charlotte Business Intelligence Group, which is how we got to know each other. So it was a professional networking education group that met, once a month or so around a
Yeah.
specific topic as it relates to data and analytics. So we got to know each other. And then even though that group doesn't formally meet anymore, we've just stayed in touch over the years. And one of the reasons I invited him on this episode, on this podcast, is it seems like when he and I always get together and talk about, data in the field and analytics and now artificial intelligence, we always end up going down a very human side of things, because when it comes to AI, there's, adoption and how humans behave. And I think that's where you'll hear some interesting, as you said, maybe differences of opinion, but maybe not. So we'll see where it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, we've seen the evolution. Obviously, we've been working in data and analytics for a long time, both Elizabeth and I, different organizations. But I also have a degree in psychology back in the day, so I'm very interested in the human aspect of AI. How it impacts humans.
So I think Michael may be the odd man out here because I'm a little bit of a closet data nerd, and I think the rest of us are data nerds, and as we had spoken about previously, the data drives a lot of this AI revolution, and AI cannot work without the data. And I know, Elizabeth, you had said at one point that data analytics was really changing because generative AI is becoming so popular. So I'm wondering what both of your views are on how that field of data analytics is now changing with generative AI.
Yeah. So, well, it's interesting because I think, you can think of AI as generative now, but there have been traditional forms of AI in the analytics field that have been around for a long time. IBM
Mhm.
Watson, right?
Of course.
There's been, machine learning and algorithms, and that piece is not new, but I think that side of AI was around historical data, looking for patterns, looking for data that's already existing. Whereas the new wave of AI is around, generating new concepts and new ideas. Like that's what the term generative AI is. And then there's even more and more newer forms of AI, and Javier can speak to that more better than I can. But what I think is changing is how we interact with data, like how we actually do data analysis. Because if I think back to my prior life in corporate analytical role, and this has been 10 years ago now, but if I was faced with a data set that I'd never seen before, I'm actually in there, I'm opening up my software, whether it's Jump or SAS or Excel, and I'm dragging and dropping things, I'm writing formulas, I'm just really, what I would say, getting my hands dirty with data now. And through that process, I feel like you really develop a deep, deep understanding of what you're working with, just because it is so tactical. Whereas now, if I imagine I'm sitting in that exact same role and I have a tool like generative AI or like a chatbot that can get into Excel and like read it for me and tell me all of these things, it's a different way that I'm interacting with the data, because I'm now reading output, which is different than the type of work I was doing before. And I wouldn't say one's necessarily good or bad. It's just very, very different. Learning information through reading is very different than, I keep saying getting your hands dirty, but, actually, making decisions about what formula to use and what columns to sum. Whereas, if you have a tool that's now doing that for yourself, like, I don't know that you have a same level of understanding. So there has to be a different side of an analyst's job that really is making sure that they're taking the time to understand the data, whereas before they had to do it because there was no choice. So that, for me, that's one of the really, really big differences that I see. What do you think?
Javier, how have you
Yeah.
seen changes? You've described parts of your career, but obviously being completely out in Microsoft and working with the healthcare world, how have you seen that piece of data analytics really change?
Yeah, there's so many angles to the conversation, but yeah, I agree with Elizabeth. And I've done it myself for years, where you get your hands on a data set, you really study the patterns, the shape of the data, what the outliers are. You get a real, almost intuitive sense of the data that you are working with. Whereas when you're just reading the output, you don't have that intuition on the data. So which leads to a risky scenario where the model may not have enough context or the right context to interpret the data, and you also yourself have that understanding of the data, so that could lead to misinterpretation. But from my side, I mean, I just the popular original generative AI models, right, going back to GPT, 3.5 when it became popular, were not great at math, right? So in fact, it was one of those things where everybody said, like, yeah, it predicts the next token, but don't expect it to do math well. That has changed a lot, and these models have won math competitions. Being able to really master a lot of math, even solve some math unresolved scenarios, right? Recently, I myself, I was working. I'm working on with a customer that needs an analysis being done, and there's a lot of numbers. Actually, it's a lot of number crunching and Excel, and uh, I worked on it yesterday. I asked the model to do a lot of formulas and double check the formulas, and it was, I'm gonna say, it was flawless, right? I've spent, so the model spent 36 minutes thinking, and then I spent about 2 hours double checking every single thing. But even so, it saved me probably 2 days worth of work.
I was going to say, how long would that have taken you to do by yourself?
Yes, yes. And in fact, it found that, Elizabeth, you might find this interesting because it needed to map two data sets, and I couldn't figure out the way to map them well. The model actually became creative and found a three-layer approach. So there's three ways to match the data set. And so it defaulted to a system. It said, I'm going to match them first this way. If that doesn't work, I'm going to match them the second way. And then the priority, that order, was based on the relevance, the context that I've given. So it figured out how to map the data, which was pretty amazing. So, so going back to the question, I think the original idea of analytics using these models, it was like, look, it's going to hallucinate and give me all sorts of gibberish. And the models can still hallucinate, but the new models, especially the frontier models, are excellent at analyzing data, and the rates of hallucination have gone down quite significantly. So I think if you're a student doing analysis, or you intend to you're aiming for a data and analytics career, seriously look at how to use these models to your advantage.
I have a question. So you said that you feel that the hallucinations and some of the early issues with math in ChatGPT or whatever models were have kind of gone away. How did you know, or how did you get comfortable to the point that you can say, yes, they don't hallucinate anymore, and you feel like you don't have to validate to the extreme that, maybe you would have a year or two ago? How did you
Yeah,
know you were there?
yeah, and the hallucination risk is still there. It probably continue to be there because the way the models work, but it's gone down tremendously. And for me, it's been two things. First, seeing the progression of frontier models, like every new model, is publicly announced that it beat, the math competition of so and so. I just saw it yesterday. There's a high school competition. I think it was 41 math problems, and it aced them all. There's also some discoveries around math, as like pure math
Mm-hmm.
scenarios that have been resolved. And I'm also aware of the newer architectures are not just, so technically speaking, they're not just the model themselves, but it's the context for the model. So like, the retrieval augmented generation and the longer, prompt windows that the models can. So there's additional techniques to help the models become more accurate.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen that, and then I've done my own personal testing again with this scenario yesterday. I was expecting to see errors, but I didn't find any errors, and there were probably, I'm going to say probably 30 calculations being done. And it was, as far as I can tell, it was 100% accurate. I went through every single thing. So that's changed. So this is one of the things that I keep hearing, and I heard in other podcasts, like if you had an experience with AI 2 years ago and you form an opinion, you need to revisit that opinion because things have changed dramatically.
Yeah, I was getting ready to ask because that was such a strong opinion a couple years ago that I still hear a lot. And I agree with you that, I have seen it come a long way, but there are a lot of people they're very hesitant because AI is bad at math. And how long is that going to take before that goes away? I don't, or will it ever go away? I don't know.
So
So,
Yeah.
because I think that exactly goes back to something Javier said, that previously those old styles of the models were just next token predictions. They weren't doing any reasoning or quote unquote thinking, where the new models take a whole different approach. I mean,
Yeah. So yeah, some of the new models can call tools, can do planning. So, the idea of a truly an agent is one where it's not just the next word or token prediction, but it can formulate a plan. It can say, hey, for this calculation, I need this data set, then I'm going to call a tool, maybe call some sort of calculation tool, and it executes the plan. So it's a full plan. And I'm going to say the good models show you the plan and show you what it's doing step by step. And the reasoning, I was kind of shocked to see one of the models that I've been working with. And as I looked at the reasoning on the step by step, it actually was thinking like a human. The words were like, it literally, it's like humming, like,
yeah.
I don't think this is going to work. I'm going to try something different. And you could see that. And the thought process is pretty remarkable.
interesting. Well, I'm taking notes. And as I said in our prep call, there was if I think back to, probably 3 years ago, having a conversation with Javier, he started talking about agents and agentic AI, and this is where we're going to be in a couple of years. And here we are. So I'm writing notes for where we're going to be in 3 years.
Well, I thank you for
You've
that.
been right so far.
And that,
Yeah.
I'm curious though, like say like accuracy and all that aside, let's just hypothetically say it gets to the point where it is super accurate. I I don't know if any of you are sports fans, but I'm curious if on a more general level, if there's any concerns you have, um, in particular with sports, with football, where analytics and data and all that has just really flooded it. And then now you're seeing this massive pushback. A lot of people is saying that it's ruining the sport and it's exposing a lot of things like not accounting for human elements and everything like that. I'm just curious if you think on a grander scale, if no matter how good things get, maybe it's perfect in terms of math and all that, if there are any glaring issues specifically related to the human element that stick out to you or make you more apprehensive about things.
Yeah, I would say there's actually a great podcast, This American Life, and there was a recent episode about this exact topic, where they talked about some of this data collection models can understand, and I don't know exactly which model or which algorithm, but basically it could rule out the judgment of having a referee, right? So the model could say, yeah, somebody was at fault, or no, this was not, somebody broke a rule. And to your point, there was some pushback. I think the sports industry is finding a little bit of a balance where they were talking about it, where there's still the human judgment. People want to have that human judgment. And a lot of audiences want you to truthfully like get mad at the referee and say like, hey, you messed up. And we want that in sports. So really applying just data and like perfect calculations is not, it misses some of the points. So I think they're finding a little bit of a balance between using analytics and judgment.
That was pretty prevalent in the recent World Cup. How if you watched with the offsides where they had the graphic of two players, and you see like the end of a shoelace was offsides, and so that a goal may have been disallowed.
Or at what point does it just become math and it's like, well, why even watch humans play this? Like, why not just load up a simulation and watch a fake game on TV?
Yeah, and that's a great point because we talked about the human side of AI. So right place for calculations and math and predictions. And then there are other scenarios where we humans are emotional and we want to enjoy, judgment, for example, and being able to, form friends because I'm mad at the referee here and, talk about it. And so, yeah, I mean, it goes to this idea of like who's leading, right? What do we want AI to do, right? We want AI to be in service to humans, right? Um, and that's important. Although Elizabeth, you and I were chatting on the last call, I think with you, that one possible outcome of artificial general intelligence is that it could take over, and just be kind of the primary creature, if you will, that survives. Again, that doesn't. We're hoping that's not the case, but
I know the exact point that you're talking about because there was something I noted where Javier, you said that the entire, I want to call it workflow or whatever process you're doing could be completely automated. And Elizabeth definitely had a different take that there are some things that are going to remain uniquely human. So that's what I think. Are there things that will still be human? And I guess we can keep this on the work productivity side, but are there things that are still going to be uniquely human, judgment, something like that, or will that be completely taken over by the robot overlords?
Well, could I ask, backing up to one piece of that, are we going to allow that to happen in the first place? And this is at like a very, very micro level, but I was talking to someone last week who had just gone to a conference where he learned how to create his own agent for the first time. And like he was really excited about a lot of the things it could do. But then he also said, but I don't want to give up control. And then we kind of had this conversation about, yeah, there might be some tasks where, yeah, you can give up control, but there are other ones that you aren't. And Javier, from just a human side, I'm wondering, what do you think of, is that going to completely prevent AI from taking over the world? Because at the end of the day, like we humans like to be in control and we are not going to give up control and completely turn over everything to agents, or is it all completely
I,
lost that they will
I'll,
take over control?
I,
Like help
I,
us here.
I'll also add that I firmly believe that this attempt to make AI seem more human in and of itself, like what you mentioned, like seeming to think or like hum to itself or what have you, like I think that will backfire a lot. And I think that the more human it seems, the more off-putting it will become to humans personally. But
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, those are all good topics, and certainly they're being discussed a lot in the industry, right? But in terms of control, the one thing I keep thinking about, and I've seen some people talking about it, is like if you have to do an analysis, like let's say you're a data and analytics professional, or you've been a student, and let's say you have to do 1,000 math calculations, right? Are you going to do them all by hand, one by one? Because you're fully in control. Or you can use something like Excel and just put a couple of formulas, and the formula is going to calculate it all for you. So you're giving up some control, right? We are already giving up control with the tools that we use every day. Like even when you fly in a plane, you don't know how the plane works, but you're using it. You're getting an advantage of using it, right? And many of our tools, we don't understand how they work. So I mean, truthfully, Gen AI, it's a little bit like that. It's gonna likely be the point where you don't really know how it's working, and in fact, a lot of people don't know how it works internally, but it's doing the job, and you're happy with letting it be to some degree in control, because it's benefiting you.
Well, I think that's where it becomes a very personal thing. Like, what am I willing to get up? What are the stakes and what am I willing to give up control for? I mean, I know plenty of people who will not fly because they don't want to put their life in, and then you can debate cars versus airplanes
Sure.
still, but it's the same kind of just belief
Yeah.
about what am I willing to give up control over? And I think from a workplace standpoint, it's like, yeah, there's some projects where you could go here, 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 and completely give that over to an agent or a team of agents. But then there are other ones that's like, but if it went wrong and it's mine, butt on the line and my name on the line, that's not something I'm willing to give up. So I think it's that balance. Have you seen those types of conversations about not only should I use agents, but how do I know what type of workflows to turn over?
Yeah, so some of the agents that are planning agents like Claude Cowork, OpenAI just came out with a work um, offering. Microsoft has Copilot Cowork. They keep the human in the loop and they explain. So the whole idea of explainability. So for example, literally this is now released right in Microsoft Copilot where you can look at your email. It asks you, do you want me to look at your emails, prioritize them, and respond to your emails that are a priority? Sure, but it does stop in every step and ask you like, hey, this is what I'm going to do, and this is why I thought it was a priority for you. So it is so the design of these new tools is trying to ensure that the human is in the loop, right?
Mhm.
I don't think anybody wants to just say, sure, just respond to everything without me knowing what's happening.
So, Elizabeth, what are those things that you are not willing to give up control to
Yeah.
an AI?
I mean, I think like just from a personal standpoint, it would be things like, I mean, I know that you could have AI like book your entire vacation, really. I mean, but I'm not going to give it my credit card. I'm not going to like it. To me, that feels strange. And I think, from a workplace standpoint, it would be something that I would need to deeply understand the things that would not be within an LLM, like the people side or what people believe, or the contextual side, which I'm sure we can talk about contextual AI, which I think is really interesting. But any project where I needed to have deep, deep understanding of the broader picture would be really hard for me to give up control because it wouldn't have the information that it needs to do the things. And even if it did do what you're telling me to come back and say, what do you want me to do here? It's like, well, I could have just done it anyway, and I don't need to put the stopgap in the middle of me describing things. So that would be an example of that, like a high risk presentation or project like that.
And
Yeah.
Javier, is there anything that you say would still remain human, or are you willing to turn everything over?
No, I mean, certainly we have human preferences, like in sports. We want to be able to get mad at the referee. We want that, right? If there's absolutely no debate because it's all data, then the appeal of sports is kind of goes away, right? So we have preferences. So there are things I want to do myself because I want to do them myself. It's my preference, right? But then there are other things that are going to make my life easier. So a lot of the maybe the output of AI that might not be helping you, let's say, analyze something or do something. Oftentimes it's because the AI model doesn't have enough context, right? So it's an understanding of who you are. What are you trying to do? What is the goal? All of that is context, right? And one of the things Elizabeth and I have talked about is in the workplace, a lot of people have that context in their heads, right? So it is what people call tribal knowledge, right? So who's the expert, at this, accounting, or, who's the expert in revenue cycle management, for example, at a hospital provider. Right. So a lot of times you find people are experts and their knowledge is in their heads. But it's kind of locked up in their heads. The new models or the new kind of wave of models uh, attempt to get data from, I mean, if you allow it, right? There's a lot of privacy and security. concerns, but if you allow it, it will take data from your emails, your chats, your document, and it will grab context from there so that the responses are much more aligned, much more useful because it understands what you're doing. It's not some generic answer. And I think Elizabeth and I were talking that still some knowledge will be in people's heads. Sometimes they're asked to write their knowledge. So like in a business setting, oftentimes people say, well, you're an expert, but what happens if you get hit by the boss? I want you to write down what you know, and they kind of force them to do that. So then the model can grab that context. But other times people don't output that tribal knowledge. But I believe that you can still infer that from their communications, their emails and stuff. You can infer some knowledge. So sorry, I think I lost track of the question, but I believe you were asking about the control. And as I said, I want to keep control on what is my preference, what I enjoy, how I want to spend my time, the kind of things that I want to dive into just because it's fun for me. That's what I want to keep control on that.
The contextual AI piece is what you're telling me is coming, or maybe is already here. So I'm in tune to that, and it's interesting to me because I think it sounds fantastic. It sounds great in theory. Where I could see it breaking down and not being used to its full potential is what about situations where information just moves so fast? And I can think of an example where like I had to do headcount analysis where, I had to map where our salespeople were and what, leads they were getting and so forth. And this was, a while ago. But, in a perfect world, that was already in our data warehouse and I could just pull it, but it didn't live in the data warehouse because it changed every single day. So I had to pick up the phone and like ask people like who's covering this center and so forth and so on, because the needs of the business was happening so fast. So what you're telling me is in this world of contextual AI, that AI would be listening to my phone calls. And
that could be one option.
that how it's gathering information? Yeah. And are we okay with that? Again, like, is that...
That's correct.
I mean,
right?
let's be honest, it already is.
My phone calls, what else is it listening to, right? So yeah, like that to me is a little creepy.
So, well, I'm also curious too, because so much of this discussion, I feel like is really, I guess really is like caught up in what AI is doing, say, in the professional environment now, and always speaking about it in the hands of like experts. But what does that mean 10, 20 years from now, as these people who have been doing these jobs for a long time became experts and then now had AI introduced, and then going into the discussion of the people who will then enter their careers in these fields and they never got that chance and they are more wholly reliant on AI. I'm just curious if that's being discussed or looked at all.
Yeah, no, so that I'm aware that's a big topic for universities, right? And students. I was at an event and somebody asked me, somebody said like, hey, I wanted to study business administration, but now with everything that's happened with AI, what should I study? And at the time, it kind of took me by surprise. I don't remember what I said, but I kind of kept thinking about it. And I think the right answer to that is you can study whatever you want, as long as you understand how can I use AI for art or for business or, just as a tool. So it doesn't mean that you need to not study certain careers, go for it, right? But learn how to use AI there. But yeah, going back to your question, I think curiosity is probably the human attribute that I would really encourage students and young professionals to have, or to grow or to leverage, because sure, 10, 20 years from now, we're gonna be able to ask AI and it'll do it for you. Now, a lot of things. You can, as a human, you can mentally disengage and say, well, AI is going to do it. Or you could use AI as a tutor and say, hey, you could do it, or don't even do it for me. Just coach me, guide me, ask me questions so that I can learn. In fact, Khan Academy uses AI as a tutor. I've used it with my daughter, and it works really well, right? So the goal there is not to solve the problem, but to help the human enlarge their knowledge, by kind of question and answers on a chatbot. So, I know this is kind of a long-winded answer, but again, if you're new to the business world or new in your career or as a student, I would encourage you to use AI as a way to learn more, right? Tutor you with your own style, give you examples of again, just quick answer, like my daughter studied math, but she loves fashion. So I'm asking the AI, hey, find fashion examples where I can teach math, and he's helping me with that. So yeah.
Yeah, I also get that question a lot about what should my son or daughter study now that we have AI, and I agree the same way. Study whatever they were going to study before, but now also figure out also how AI can fit into that, because yeah, it's not that black and white as this entire field has gone away. It's still there. It's just we have this supercharged tools that can help us be better. So us being the key.
Yeah. Yeah, and where you don't want to end up is being in a situation where your mind has disengaged. AI is doing all the work for you, and then you have learned nothing, right? So sure. So I teach as an adjunct, and I get a sense of students that are, getting perfect assignments, and AI sometimes has a recognizable way of responding. Honestly, in my head, I think they're not doing themselves a favor if they're using it to avoid learning, right? So, being curious, using it as a tool to learn is the right way to use it.
Javier, I'm curious, there's some discussion in my department, the analytics department, about the future of students getting careers and being managers of agents. I'm curious what your reaction to that is.
I think that's true. That is accurate. Yeah, that's where we're going. We're going to, and it's already happening, by the way. This is already reality for many people, that you're managing a bunch of agents that are doing work for you. But what that means is,
what does that mean? Can you describe that?
Yeah. And is that different than managing humans? Like, is it the same management skills, or are they different?
That's a great question, actually. So yeah, what it means is that, we're seeing that more clearly is in software development, software engineering, where in the past you would come in and code, right? You would just write code. Now AI can write a lot of the code, maybe not everything, but it can write a ton of code for you. So your job is to spin up agents and have them do different, let's call it different portions of the application. So there might be 3, 4, 5 agents writing code, and you're basically monitoring, making sure that they're accomplishing the goal that you set out to do. So you're managing those agents, and the same is starting to translate to other careers like sales, right? So you might have it, research a proposal for you and find out the market opportunity. So you have multiple agents working at the same time. Yeah, at Microsoft, we now have the concept of just as you have an email account, agents have an email account and can chat with you. So you can add them to a chat and say, hey, so-and-so bot or agent, what do you think about this? And then the agent is interacting just like another person in your meeting. So that's interesting.
Do agents have personalities, like, or will we ever get to that point that
Yeah, no,
that there are some agents behave differently under different contexts, and that's something we're going to have to account for?
My take is that we give them a personality, right? So when I'm using it with my daughter, I am giving it a very specific personality, which is how she prefers to learn, right? I don't know if out of the box. I mean, there's been some debate about if out of the box a model leans more towards the right or the left politically, and you can read about that online. But generally speaking, you could just give it a personality, just prompt it, for a personality.
It really makes you think and define, like, what does that actually mean to manage that versus a human, and what are the differences between the two?
Yeah.
Yeah, where I'm trying to get this straight in my head, how is it different than just using another software application? Like if I'm sitting down and doing my job, I have different applications I would use, but I think what you're talking about is managing is different than using something.
Yeah, so I mean, just to give an example, so in healthcare, one of the things Microsoft has done is, um, for the more complex patient cases, doctors often get together to discuss treatment, like what is the right treatment, right? And there might be a radiologist and a pathologist, so doctors from different specialty areas, and they bring together the data to discuss the case. Microsoft's been working with a few providers where there's a radiology agent, there's a pathology agent that really understands that specialty, and it has access to tools and data, so that when doctors are chatting amongst each other, they can also ask the radiology agent, like, "Hey, the latest X-rays and find a pattern here. Do you see cancer or tumor on those X-rays?" So they're basically chatting with specialized agents, and sometimes you can ask them to work together to do something, right? That's when we have this multi-agent orchestration idea where they're working together.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like there always just feels like there's this need to make AI more human. So is that because people just want to interact with they prefer to interact with a human? So do you think that at any point this loops back to them eventually not wanting these agents, and they will end up wanting again just like actual humans to work with?
Yeah, I don't. So what I described is happening. This is a real multi-agent implementations happening in the real world. What is driving that is not so much the need to reduce human involvement, but more doctors want to spend more time with patients. They want to spend more time using their expertise. So the quote unquote boring job of pulling data, interpreting data, mapping data, that's something that doctors used to do manually or still do, but you can offload that to an agent, right? And you don't want some generic agent, you want a specialized agent that understands radiology, right? So it's actually really aiming to free doctors up to be more human, right? Um,
So let's bring all this back to the education. And
yeah,
we're talking about how our students who are going to graduate are going to use AI once they, post education out in the real world. How do we integrate the AI into their educational journey so they are prepared to use it once they leave college?
For me, it's the curiosity piece. It all goes back to being curious. And I think the curious person will be successful in life no matter what. So, as educators, finding ways to instill curiosity as we teach AI, and also having it be so that students can explore. And kind of going back to our discussion about control and giving up control, maybe it's giving paces where it's totally okay that you like bomb this assignment, or not bomb this assignment, maybe that's not the right term, but it's places where you learn where, yes, we give up control here, but we don't give up control here, and allow them to take more risks so that when they do get out into their careers, they have that better sense of the uncertainty and the figuring out what to use when, where. Because I think that's what we're always saying is learn how to use AI. And that's not like, this is what it is, this is where it comes from. It's not the mechanics of it, it's the judgment. And so I think as educators, we have to continue to make sure that we are providing a platform for our students to explore, to take risks, and to be curious so that they can develop those own skills and then take them out to their career.
yeah. No, I agree completely. I think being exposed to the AI, I don't know if this is the case or not, but I believe I've talked to a few students that are about to graduate, and they have probably a negative view of AI, because of all the job displacements, and I get that, right? At the same time, it's useful to know how AI works, what it's good for, what it's not good for, and that happens just with exploration, experimentation. Just try it out, use it, just make sure that you're learning something as you're using it, not just check off mentally and have it do something, but just play with it, right? Again, the models have evolved so much over the last 2 years. I notice it. So I know we're almost at time here, but one of my colleagues went out on maternity leave, and Microsoft has a very generous maternity leave program. I think it's 6 months. She was with her baby. Just in 6 months, when she came back, it was mind blowing for her how much AI had advanced. Like in just 6 months, she came back and we were doing things with AI that 6 months before were not doable. And so just play with it, experiment with it. Things continue to change. Just be curious about AI. Right?
Is that more incumbent on the students or the educators to create this curiosity? Are there things the educators can do to spark that curiosity in the students?
I think it's being clear on what the learning outcomes are, is if it's just, the type of assignment or assessment where, you're learning through exploration, and, maybe there isn't a defined outcome for this assignment where it's black and white. You either get this or this, but the outcome is more the reflection that you went through and what you learned and how you think about it. So I think it's changing the framing and changing what we're asking students to do, even though the material is the exact same way, or the material hasn't changed, right? The foundations and the fundamentals are the same. It's just how are we asking students to interact with it and think of it and do differently with the material now that we have AI, is my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I would just add to that, and again, I'm mostly, I do teach, but the majority of the time I'm in the corporate world, and I do see there is people succeed when they take ownership on things, right? So, yeah, sure, professors, teachers can set up an environment and stimulate this idea of curiosity, but ultimately, I would encourage the students to try to take some initiative on that curiosity. That's something that it's a really good trait to have, and it's going to help you in after graduation. Just being curious, it's important.
Now, in an era of where it's been talked about for years already, of like, say, doom scrolling and then issues with uh, social relationships and all that, is there any way to help students not kind of, I guess, fall down possible even bigger pitfalls that come with AI, to where now even more than just like, scrolling and watching videos for hours at a time, they can foster these AI friendships, relationships, offload their work, possibly have it write papers. How can we help? How can we help the younger people not fall into those pitfalls? Because I agree. I think curious people and people with initiative, they'll succeed no matter what. But I do worry about maybe the people who need a bit more of motivation and a push to stop them from falling through those cracks.
Yeah, maybe there's an opportunity, and actually I haven't seen this much, and what good looks like paint the picture of this is what a successful student or a successful doctor or whatever a role looks like, uh, as they use AI, right? So again, in my head, I've been forming this picture of a successful student uses AI, but as a way to foster learning, not as a way to disengage, but as a way to keep engaged with the interaction with AI. So maybe education around this is what good looks like or the preferred way look like might help. Because yeah, if you don't have an understanding of the goods and the bads, it's easy to use it potentially in the wrong way. Just have it do my assignment and hey, nobody's gonna know. Like but it's not helpful to you, right? So education is probably important. I haven't seen a lot of this, by the way.
What a crazy concept, actually teaching our students how to use AI appropriately.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's my soapbox that I've been on for a little while.
But it's a relevant question, Michael, that I think you bring up. And I think we're being faced with it at younger and younger ages. I know my oldest is 10, so all of my children are under 10. And he has a school issued laptop that has Google on it and he can access Gemini. And this was not the year that I thought I was going to have to approach that. I thought that was going to be many years down the road. So it's definitely, I don't have a great answer for you. We tend to be as low tech as possible. My husband in his house and kind of roll it out, but you can't hide from it forever. So eventually we're going to have to learn. So maybe in a year from now, be back on a year, you can ask me how it's going and you can ask me if I have given AI agents my credit card yet to plan my vacation. And then that'll be our benchmark to see.
Everybody has their own evals and test cases, and there we go. That's yours right there.
You'll know about the otter test that Ethan Mollick does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. He has the same test he gives it, over time, and it is really cool to see something tangible, how it's changed over time.
Yeah, where otter using Wi-Fi on an airplane.
On a plane, yeah. And so if you look back at the earliest images, I mean, it's nothing like what you would imagine. And now the images are like exactly what you would imagine. So it's interesting.
All right. I think we're about out of time. We have been all over the place. This has been a really fun discussion. But now I'm going to ask both Elizabeth and Javier to do one last thing. I'd like a little piece of advice. Something that you would like your educator colleagues to step out of their box and maybe try that could be a hot take or something that they maybe haven't done before.
For me, it would be a assignment that's just completely exploration. It doesn't have to be one assignment or, just incorporate exploration into the discipline that you teach in some way, shape, or form, and just have the assessment be pure reflection. And, it can be, you can grade it along the depth of reflection or, you can come up with what the rubric is, but the true assignment is that students are allowed to explore and take risks and make mistakes. And it doesn't matter what they come up with, like there's no right or wrong. It's just that they went through the process and then can reflect and learn on it. So that's mine.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, this is very much an exploratory area here on what educators can do. But I think going back to what Elizabeth said, like I think you said something about explaining. So if a student can explain something, that matters, I think. So just a brief example, my daughter is 14. I asked her so she will learn how to use AI. I asked her to do a presentation on how to improve the sales of a bakery, imaginary bakery. And she did it, and she wanted to write it all, but I said, don't just say AI, just do the presentation with that. And she was really conflicted about it, but she did it. So she used AI as I told her to. And then I told her, well, now you're going to have to present it to one of my colleagues. But that means you need to understand every bullet point on that presentation. So that's going to take a little bit more work, and that's where you get engaged. You need to read the room, you need to understand how people are reacting. And so again, that was with my daughter, but in general, even for college students, like, yeah, go ahead, use AI in my view, but then explain the output to me. I think that really tests the learning, I think.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both to our guests here, and as always, we always welcome our guests back. Hopefully not a full year, but anytime you want to come back and impart some more wisdom and tell us what's coming next. Obviously, it's context and contextual workflow now. So Javier's a futurist, and we're going to hold him to this.
For sure.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Great combo. Thanks.
Thanks again to our guests, and thanks for listening to the Deacs.AI podcast. Please continue to follow the AI discussion by subscribing on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And if you have any comments, questions, or want to join the discussion, please email us at Deacs.AI@wfu.edu.